This episode is made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.
Hey, this is René Brooks, and welcome to Distraction. This week, we've been talking about how ADHD impacts communities of color and Black children in particular. Today, I'm sharing more from my conversation with Dr. Loucresie Rupert, a child and adult psychologist focused on neurodiversity, Nathalie Thandiwae, a neurodiversity resource navigator for parents, and Rhashida Perry-Jones, the founding coordinator of CHAD in Philadelphia. And for those of you who don't know, CHAD stands for Children and Adults with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and is an organization that works to improve the lives of people affected by ADHD. All three of my guests today are also parents of kids with ADHD. In the last episode, you heard about some of their experiences and advice for other parents, and today we're picking up the conversation with a discussion about the professionals who treat ADHD and the work that needs to be done to educate them about neurodiversity. Here's Dr. Loucresie Rupert talking about getting diagnosed with ADHD while she was in her psychiatry residency, and the surprising fact that her program director at the time, a psychiatrist, shared with her after learning of her diagnosis.
So obviously, as psychiatric professionals myself, I will be the first to say that psychiatry, psychology in general, has done a very poor job of looking at ADHD as anything other than a school disorder, versus like whole life, as Nathalie was saying. Even, like I said, I wasn't diagnosed until I was adult. And I was actually diagnosed while I was in psychiatry residency. And my residency, my program director told me that he didn't believe in adult ADHD until he met me.
Wow.
I was like, well, I don't really know how to take that, but I'm going to go ahead and take it as a positive because you're a psychiatrist that's treating adults, and adults, ADHD, it was just thought that ADHD went away for some reason when you turn 18. Yeah. I don't know why they ever thought that. Obviously, that is changing in the field of psychiatry now. Things are slowly improving. I'm obviously of the mindset that if you have a diagnosis, like, you're going to be labeled. You're going to be labeled as an ADHD kid. Are you going to be labeled as a bad kid? Are you going to be labeled as a stupid kid? And I'm not saying that kids are stupid. I'm saying that this is what people are going to say.
Right.
So, my mantra is, let me give you the label that is going to give you help and resources. But there is still a lot of mantra of other mental health professionals that, well, a lot of people don't think like you, Dr. Rupert. So when you give this label, it's still going to, I don't want to give this label to this child because it's stigmatizing. But we have to move past that, and we have to give kids the diagnosis they need, to give resources they need. And honestly, we just need to change. It shouldn't be, we know it shouldn't be stigmatizing. We know it's going to take time, but it starts in psychiatry. It starts with the professionals. Right. I'm in physician groups. And as a physician with ADHD, I see how other physicians talk about treating adults with ADHD. And I know we're talking about children, but our children grow up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hello, we're all not just dressed. I actually can't even take stimulants because of the way they affect me, which is super sad because I have severe ADHD, and I need the stimulants, but I can't take them because of the side effects for me. But, that goes to say that medicine in general just has a lot of work to do with neurodiversity, with ADHD, autism, anything that's just not neurotypical. We have a lot of work to do. And unfortunately, that means it falls on a lot of parents at this point to educate the quote unquote professionals. And it really shouldn't be like that, but that's where we are at this point.
And just along what you were saying, Doctor, I found that in dealing with teachers and dealing with heads of schools, principals, assistant principals, school counselors, school nurses, all those different folks, one of the things I did was, try to model the type of the way that I talked about my child. So I did a lot of reframing, and like they said, well, she can be very bossy in school. She knows exactly what she wants, and she likes to speak. She's communicative. She knows exactly what she wants. She's a leader. Oh, she's too energetic. She's this, she's that. She's exuberant. She's very excited about some of the work that she's doing. So a lot of times I really reframed when they would talk to me about my daughter. I would do
Right.
active listening and reflect it the way that I wanted them to speak about my child.
Yes.
And when coming into these meetings, they started getting used to that and changing some of their language, at least when they were dealing with me, about my daughter, because when they would start with some negative labels or negative ways of describing her, I just didn't accept it. I said, we are not going to speak about her this way. This is how we're going to speak about her. And you have to really be careful, not careful, but it can be intimidating because this one has a PhD and they have a this and they have an EDD and they have a MD and a da 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 da. That doesn't matter. I know my child. I know what she needs. I'm very confident about that. I don't care how many letters you have behind you. I know that I'm bright and I know that I know what I'm talking about and I'm going to do what's best for her, regardless of what any of you say. And you have to really have that kind of conviction.
And that's that on that. Like, first of all, I'm not trying to go up against none of y'all in an IEP meeting, so thank God I never have to. As you were navigating that, what was emotionally, what was happening for you as a parent, and what do you think got you through trying to fight those negative labels and fight for them to get the labels they needed and the care that they needed?
I'm a person that totally hates any type of injustice.
Yeah,
So,
that's an ADHD symptom, by the way. I'm just gonna put that out there.
yeah, any type of injustice. So when it came to, just in general, and then my child, I just felt like, when they looked at the race, that was one thing. So there were these racial, and they were being biased against her
Yeah.
because of her race. They were being biased against her because of, how they perceived her to be and her behavior, and that just fueled me and wanting to stand up. Because the other thing, there were other children that were having similar issues and other parents that may not have. And I felt like, well, since I'm able to do this and since that I have this kind of fire burning in my belly about this, let me do this work, so that other parents can join in and feel supported in doing the work as well. Because oftentimes these schools, particularly private schools, they try to make you feel a certain type of way. And we need to kind of band together and talk to other parents who may be experiencing the same thing so that we can let the schools and these heads of schools and these principals know that we're just not going to sit idly by for any type of injustice.
You know what? That's a recurring theme that I'm seeing in the conversation too. Natalie, you brought it up earlier. When you said that you wanted to do more for your son, they said he's in a STEM school. Why isn't that enough? So it's almost like I feel like when we're moving in these spaces, the impression is like, okay, Black person, Black parent, you've had these successes. Shouldn't you just be glad you had any success at all? Why do you feel like you need to push for additional? Why do you feel like you need to push for better than good enough? Like, why aren't you grateful enough for these things that you've been given?
Yeah. And interestingly, I see it play out that way with other parents as well, regardless of race. That particular piece of the hoarding.
Really good. Okay. I mean, not good, but you know what I mean.
Well, no, I'm not done. The hoarding of the resources, and the resource guarding, they do that. It's like a hose. They
Oh
do that to
no.
everybody, like to see what they can knock out. You know what I mean? It's like the Hunger Games trying to get to the resources. So it's a game of knockout. No, but I think it's absolutely spot on. There is a lot of implicit bias and explicit bias once you make it, you know what I mean, into those rooms to even get that IEP or that 504. You're dealing with human beings and you're dealing with a system run by human beings who have their own biases, and you'll deal with not only explicit and implicit racial bias, gender bias, all those things. But also microaggressions. I had what I thought were very inappropriate vibes sometimes from people on the school side of the table during meetings, and had to, like, set people straight. I had a very mean lawyer, so that helped, who was not taking it. But a couple of times I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to grit my teeth a little too, which isn't my personality. I'm a pretty laid back person. But yes, you will find that the whole system is designed to minimize distributing the needed resources to the students that need them. And then within that, you'll find all of the stuff you find everywhere else in these institutions, educational institutions, in terms of bias.
Okay. And yeah, so part of the reason is that schools are underfunded. They really are. They're underfunded. So they're trying to decide who gets what. But what I tell my parents, my patients that I'm seeing, what I tell their parents is that that's not my problem. That's not your problem.
Yeah.
So I don't know whose problem it is, but it's not our problem. Your kid, like, you're fighting for your kid to get what they need. A lot of things need to change with education. And generally, educators also agree with that. They would like more funding too, but in the end, that's not our problem. My kid needs what they need, and they're going to get what they need to get. And I don't really care how you figure it out.
Yeah. And I think in addition to being underfunded, I have a master's in public health. I'm definitely a systems person and a public health person. And I really see the intersections of public health, education, workforce, all of that in these issues around neurodivergence and getting the support you need. But I also think there's this other piece where people do not have the training to give them the capacity to identify when people have needs they can't meet, and to triage them, and for the system to support them at large. So it's kind of like if you went into a restaurant and you said, I'm going to need a diabetic meal. And they were like, we just don't have that on the menu.
Like, what is a diabetic meal?
Right. So often you're making a demand of a system that you expect. It's like, it's the education system. There's PhDs, MDs, EDDs in here. And you're making this demand that seems like this should be the place to make it, but you're making it among people who may have never had the training or been given the capacity to even respond to the demand, even as far as to triage you. So that's the other huge disconnect, is that the system just isn't designed to support a lot of these children and their issues. And so that's kind of like part of the fight. And it's shocking. You'd think, like, why wouldn't they be educating teachers and school psychologists about neurodevelopment, or physicians even, or therapists? But it's just, there's a gap in the education system on the training side as well.
And we've been talking about these gaps for a long time. Why do the gaps still exist?
Because children aren't
like
important.
This is not like, ooh, say it again.
I mean, children aren't important to other people, obviously not to me.
No.
But I mean, children aren't important. They don't pay taxes. They can't demand things. They have no capital. They have no way to make their voice known. So why would they spend extra time? I mean, because we know research has shown us how to fix all of these gaps. The research is out there. The research has been out there. So it's not about knowing how to do it. It's not about getting the research to do it. It's known how to do this. Children just aren't important enough to do it. And I'm not quite sure how to change that.
I think the interesting thing, like, when you're looking for resources and when you're asking for help, the first thing that they ask you is, what do you need? Like, even like as a child, it was like, what can we give you to help you concentrate? The frustration for me, and even as an adult, people are always asking, well, what do you need? I'll give it to you. If I knew what I needed, I'm a very resourceful person, and I would go find that resource and provide it for myself before I came to ask you. So if I'm coming to you for help, I need collaboration and I need ideas. I can't give you what I need. I can give you the problem, and let's get creative together. So I think, like, is that something that you all experienced when you were trying to get help, like where they were like, well, just tell me what you need. Bye.
Yeah, for us, it was kind of strange because, of course, these children are very, very smart. So of course, you get all the A's, highest performing when it comes to math and English and all these things. So why do you need this help? But you don't want to wait until your child starts to fail in order for you to have any type of intervention or any type of accommodation.
Right.
we were able to kind of create a team with the school and outside of the school as her support system. And, we were lucky enough, we started off in private school, ended up going to a public school that we thought had better resources to help, create her kind of, accommodation plan that's going to support her throughout her schooling. And we were lucky, the nurses, the counselors, my family coach, or social worker, all these folks would come together. We had meetings regularly about how best to support her. I would try things at home. If they worked at home, we would work with the teacher and implement, the same type of token system, the same type of behavior modification system. We would just translate that also to the school. And that kind of support and working in partnership with the school really turned out to work well. And then when we decided to put her back into private school, we took that same plan to private school, and they implemented the same thing. So it was working in partnership with the school that yielded the best outcomes for our daughter.
That's great.
I think for me, I had a little different experience. My kids have additional needs in addition to just ADHD. So it's really easy to get them an IEP and get them support because it was very obvious that they needed it. But where I run into issues is that I am my kid's parent. I obviously know these teachers in professional settings for my other patients. I attend IEPs, I know the principals. But when I'm attending my children's IEP, I am their parent. There are times that I absolutely struggle as a parent. I am overwhelmed. I am drowning. But because I'm a child psychiatrist, they look to me for the solutions. And I'm like, no, I'm the parent. I need you to tell me what to do. I can't be my own support, as a parent. So like my children have a mental health case manager involved that really doesn't, they're nice, but they don't really do anything because they expect me to know all the resources. And I am like, no, like you're the case manager. I'm literally, we have a meeting coming up and I'm gonna just have to say there are some things going on in my household that I need help with. Yeah, I help other families with this, but we talk about me right now. And I need you to get me resources. I cannot keep doing all of this myself. So I kind of run into the opposite of where I haven't struggled to get my kids resources. Like I said, I have had to struggle to get my nieces and nephews resources. But my own kids, I haven't necessarily had to struggle to get them resources as far as getting support in school. But I have had to struggle to not run the show.
Yeah.
And like I want somebody to help me sometimes. Like I am not trying to run the show in this case because I'm the parent. I'm the mom. Y'all need to be helping me.
Absolutely.
And I know all IEP parents run the show, but I can't really describe it, but it's just a little different because they expect me to come in like I come in when I'm coming in as a psychiatrist, and that's not my role.
Right, because you're a mom. Just like you can't treat your children, you can't be the psych for your children in any capacity, including an IEP meeting.
Right.
What would you like to see ideally happen for parents when they're trying to get resources, when they're trying to identify this problem for their own children?
I think neurodiverse positive professionals. So people who don't see neurodiversity as like this death sentence that some professionals seems to think it is.
Right.
Obviously, in a perfect world, the finances to get whatever resources you need. But I think the thing that would change most parents and most children's experience would just be professionals that are educated in a positive way on neurodiversity. Medicine is kind of built on a deficit model. And in a way, like we understand that because normally you're coming to get those deficits. You're coming because of the deficits that you need help with. But it needs to be more, we need to know more about neurodiversity than just the deficits because we need to be looking at the whole picture, the whole child holistically and getting them where they need to be.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Anybody else?
I think, well, the schools just to be more so in partnership, that seemed to work best for us. When the relationship started, it was basically, me principal, me doctor, me this, and you parent. And instead of having that type of relationship, seeing each other as a support system, and it's not about the person being, the doctor who is at the school or the nurse. We are all together trying to support this child, and we all need to look at this child and what they need beyond what anything else that we think should happen. And I think that can be kind of challenging because every child is different, and what may work for one child, my child had ADHD, ODD, and anxiety. Where there may be someone else that has ADHD and they may be on the autism spectrum, and they may have, something else. So let's look at every child, differently, and deal with their needs and approach it that way instead of approaching it like one size fits all. And I think that when schools, and education facilities, look at things that way in partnership and looking at the best thing for the child, I think there's bound to be like better outcomes.
I love that.
Yeah, I think all of that makes a lot of sense. I think if it'd be nice to wave a magic wand and suddenly have training for practitioners, providers, and teachers, educators that really brought them up to speed on neurodevelopmental conditions, and especially for diagnosing clinicians and for teachers who are trying to identify and triage kids to really understand what these things look like, because so many clinicians are not really familiar with differential diagnosis. So let's say you have some co-occurring conditions, ADHD, anxiety, this, that, and the other. You may be told you don't have ADHD, you're bipolar, or you have a personality disorder, this, that, and the other, and you wind up on this spinning on a wheel for sometimes years or decades without getting what you need. So I would love to see a mass kind of re-education around neurodevelopment and neuroscience for clinicians and educators. And then also this idea that was spoken about, affirming. I think not only do people need to be educated about the technical aspects and the science, but also just about embracing neurodiversity and having empathy and compassion for our differences and for people for whom these traits are disabling or highly disruptive or mean that they need a lot of support or help in order to get to the next level in their development. Some of the things that I've seen or that other parents and families have shared with me about how they've been treated just in the process of trying to get help, the cruelty that they've experienced from clinicians and teachers and educators it takes your breath away. And I think under it is often ignorance, like not really understanding or having the skill set to be of value or help in the situation, and then just sort of being reactionary from there. But if these parents weren't so determined, I could see how they could easily just fall to the wayside. And, and I've also met parents who said, I know there's something going on, but I just don't have the time or energy. And so if the system could somehow help children whose parents do not have the information or wherewithal to fight this fight, even with educators and clinicians being able to identify children and triage them for diagnosis would be something huge. But yeah, that would be nice.
I agree with Nathalie. One of the things we don't talk about is the fact that we are so hardcore for our children does mean somebody else isn't getting what they need. And it shouldn't be like that. Like, it shouldn't be your parents have to be over the top for you to get what you need. And if they're not, then you fall through the cracks. Like, that's not acceptable.
That part. Like, I can remember, even though I wasn't being treated for my ADHD, my mother would go up to the school in a minute if there was a problem and be that parent who was in there like, she needs this, she needs that, she's here, she's supposed to be here, what's going on, how do we support her, what does she need? And just like you said, Nathalie, some parents, like, they just can't do it. They've got their own things that they're trying to manage, their whole people as well. One of the things that I wanted to ask y'all, what did you do to keep your children encouraged? Because those messages that they're distributing to you when they're talking about what the challenges for the children are, they're saying those things directly to your children too, are they not? Like, you're too noisy, you're a behavior problem, you're whatever adjective they decide to throw at these children. How do you kind of preserve their self-esteem in the midst of that?
Well, that's something that can be challenging to do. I mean, because they get a lot of negative messages. I mean, when you first of all, their negative messages when you look at, the media when it comes to people that are Black, you get a lot of negative
Right.
messages. So you're fighting with some of those negative images that they're seeing, and then they can get some negative messages from from their friends, from people that are also family members. So one of the things that we thought was very important, sometimes we passed on those Thanksgiving dinners if it was a family member that may not have been as compassionate or understanding about, what my daughter was going through.
Right.
And we would have, that Thanksgiving dinner at home. Also, teaching her about certain boundaries that you don't have to accept negative treatment from other people. You don't have to try to be their friend and if someone is mean to you, you don't have to deal with them. One of the things we used to do is when we would go to parties, I would say, okay, well, look for the smiling face. And if she came back to me and said, Mommy, there is no smiling face, then we would leave. If there's no smiling face, then we would leave and we would go and do something else.
Yes.
So always, making sure that you also use that descriptive praise when talking to them about things that they do. Being very, very intentional about giving them these positive messages, knowing that they may get negative messages from other places, and making sure you know what their strengths are and giving them opportunities to develop those strengths even more. We were lucky enough to have some other friends that had ADHD, and we had like an ADHD Go Girls Club where the girls would get together, and she would say, they feel they're like me, and that's what we do, and get with other parents who have children that have ADHD and form different groups and playtimes so that they can see that there are other children that are just as exuberant and just as curious and just as eager to talk as they are.
Oh, I want to go to. Why don't we ever go to
We need an adult
meeting?
Yeah.
We need one of those. Look. Never mind. We done recording. We gonna go find us a meeting, y'all.
For my kids, they're still pretty young. I'm very open. Like, they all know we all know each other diagnosis. I actually started talking to them about the medications that they take, what they take it for. I actually do that with my patients too. By the time you're like 5 or 6, I'm like, they need to be talking to me by themselves a little bit. Parents, like, go on about your business. I mean, obviously I listen to the parents, but I'm like, let's give them some space because they need to start learning how to talk and stand up for themselves.
Right.
But my kids still, I think, are very, because of some of their needs, they're kind of oblivious sometimes. They just have a lot of confidence, both of them, and I've been really lucky with that. My son particularly, my son is also autistic. So when he was younger, he went to an autism specific school. And like Rhashida was saying, he had friends that were kind of on different level. Well, I don't really like using levels in the spectrum, but different social needs. And so they were best friends, but they would get together and then parallel play and not even really like interact with each other that much. But they loved it. And so just having people around that's like them,
Yes.
now that they're older, they kind of mostly play with each other because we're in a place where we don't know a lot of people. I don't really let my kids go around a lot of people. But one thing I do is there's a website called outschool.com that has a lot of really nice classes. Like, my son is into Minecraft, and I just signed him up for like a Minecraft social club and a Minecraft. He's not as great in math as he is in reading, and so I just signed him up for like a Minecraft multiplication class. So encouraging them in the things that they're good at, that language. I think just being open, like, obviously, because I'm neurodiverse myself, our household is neurodiverse positive just in general. That's not something I have to try to do. Like, I'm just neuropositive because I'm like, I'm great. So obviously there's nothing wrong with it. And I have a lot of friends. I just always, even before I knew I was neurodiverse, I guess, we just attract each other. So I have a lot of friends that are neurodiverse, and we're all on this, neurodiverse positivity. Like, that's a big movement right now. Like, obviously there are difficulties. ADHD is absolutely a disability. I'm not saying it's all rainbows and sunshine, but it also does have positives. And I'm just blunt with both of those things. And we're just going to be open about, what's going on and our difficulties. We're going to work on it, and then we're going to be happy about the things like the creativity and the energy. Well, I don't have energy anymore, but kids still have the energy it brings them, and we're just going to be happy about those things.
It's wonderful. I think we do some of the things that you guys mentioned. I know we try to be positive about our neurodifferences. I have ADHD. My husband, he seems to think he's neurotypical, but that ship sailed. So, but we're all a little quirky, and so we try to be positive about being yourself, and this idea that this was how you were designed. So here it is. I think we also try to emphasize this idea of following your interests and try to support our child in his special interests. For him, those include aviation and the Chinese language. So, he does study Mandarin, and he subs that at his school for the foreign language requirement. And he is now in an aviation-related, out of school activity, which, if he stays with it, can lead to him getting his pilot's license. So, on the at-home and parenting side, I think for me, I had to learn how to become much more flexible as a parent. I'd say my husband is like a marshmallow. And, I'm still a little less, I'm not quite my husband, but for me, it was like having to learn to humble myself before spirit and really ask to be made into the parent that my child actually needs instead of the parent that I wanted to show up as and that I imagined being. And that's a continuous prayer and spiritual practice for me. And there's so many levels to that because, children change. So it's like, I'll think, okay, I got this. I kind of got this figured out. I'm in a rhythm. And then, my child has, needs in a different area. And I'm like, my skill set is not really there. So I'm going to need more support. So yeah, that constant, you're kind of constantly at the wheel. This is not set it and forget it parenting. You have to be very attentive.
Right. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much to Rhashida Perry-Jones, Nathalie Thandiwae, and Dr. Loucresie Rupert for joining me today. We'll put all of their links in our show notes. And as you might have guessed, these ladies and I have a lot more to talk about, so keep an eye out for one more episode with them as we continue to celebrate ADHD Awareness Month. Okay, please reach out to us with an email or a voice memo and let us know what you think. You can even send me a question if you like. Our address is connect@distractionpodcast.com. And remember to subscribe to Distraction wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. Our producer is Sarah Gerton, and I'm René Brooks. You can find me at blackgirllostkeys.com and on Twitter at BLKGirlLostKeys. Thank you so much for listening.
The episode you just heard was made possible by our sponsor, Landmark College, the college for students who learn differently, offering comprehensive supports for students with ADHD and other learning differences, both on campus and online. Learn more at lcdistraction.org.